folks, I'm Nick Donatelli from Love Do. Welcome back to the Houdini for MoGraph series. Today we're going to be creating this sort of confetti pinata effect. The basic idea is to simulate a bunch of pieces of cloth falling off of an object when we tell it to. So let's dive in. If you grab the project files from our site, you'll have this model set up to work with, but you can just use any model or even try to recreate this one. It's just a cube with some extrusions on it. Using a simple bend deformer, I added some twisting animation for us to use as our base. So I'm just going to make a null and name it Geo for us to reference later. So I'm going to drop a time shift, right click, and delete channel to freeze our object. And now make a scatter node so that we have points we can copy onto. And now we're going to make an attribute that we're going to use later to make the pieces fall off. So make a point vop and head in. We want it to happen from top to bottom, so make a vector to float and a fit. Hook that up to the P and the Y values. Now our max height on our model is around 2.4, so we're just going to set our max at 2.5 and then invert the output. Now to add animation, we're going to use another fit and then one more, and we're going to hook this one up to the frame value. And I'm going to fit it from 1020 to 1070. And we're going to make the max 0.999 so that there's no overlap. And set that to the minimum here. Now hook that up to the CD, and you can see we have a ramp that travels down. But we want it to just be on or off. So we're going to use a compare node and just set it to greater than 0. And there we have it. Now bind export this to an attribute called unpin for us to use. And now let's bind export another attribute, which we're just going to hook up here, the ptnum, and name it ID. Now because I'm going to have this set on the ground, I don't want any confetti bits at the very bottom here. So I'm just going to blast node set to points and type in at p.y is less than 0.1 just to kill those points. Now the last thing is to make an attribute interpolate node to bring back our animation. We need these source attributes, so if you head back to the scatter node, you can just check these on, and then we have animation. Now I have this grid here, which is just moved so that the end is on the z-axis. I'm going to make a group node named pin with type set to points, and then enable the bounding box and expand it so that it encompasses the whole end here. So we have something that's pinned onto the geo. I have a transform to make this way smaller, and then just do a simple copy to points onto our geo. Now we want that unpin attribute to affect this pin group that we made. So we're going to use an attribute wrangle to change the group value. So to access groups, it's similar to an attribute where you use at, but then you follow it with group underscore name of the group. So pin in our case. Now I'm going to type times equals, saying multiply the current value by what we're about to type, which is int, just to let it know we're grabbing an integer value. And then in parentheses, we're going to type at unpin, close those parentheses, and followed by a semicolon. Now just to make it tidy, I'm going to drop an attribute delete and get rid of CD and source attributes. And then make a null and name it in to say here's where the prepped geo is. So to make these fall with some nice bend, we're going to use Houdini's cloth solver, which is called Vellum. We're going to start by building the cloth. So by making a Vellum constraints node with the type set to cloth. The values here all affect the sim differently. So I'm going to give you what I used in mine, but definitely play around with these so you can see, what each one does and get some different looks out of it. So I'm going to set the normal drag to 20, stiffness to 10, and 1E7. Dampening is going to be around 0.05, bend up to 10 and 10,000. With the dampening at 0.07. And now we want to use our pin group to actually pin these points. So to make another Vellum constraint, and then hook up these two nodes and set this to pin to target. Our group type is points, and it's our pin group. Now change this pin type to stopped, and check on match animation. Now make two nulls, and the first one named Geo1, and then the second one will just be called con because this is where our constraints live. Now we're going to get into the actual simulation. So make a DOPNet and dive inside. Make a vellum object, vellum solver, and vellum source, and hook them up like this. In the source, we're going to want to grab the geo and the constraints. So here, type .././geo1, and then you can copy that down here and just change that to con. Now in the solver, I'm going to turn the constraint iterations down to 1 just to speed things up a little bit in our simulation. Okay, and just add gravity. And if we hit play, you can see that we have our pieces pinned to the animation swinging around. So we want to make them fall. So we're going to use a SOP solver after the source. Here we're going to use an object merge and bring in our in geo, which has the changing pin attribute. Make a group copy and bring in our pin group into points and change conflict to overwrite. Last, make an attribute wrangle. And now in the vellum sim, we can see that we have these two new attributes called glue to animation and stopped. So we want these to turn off when they unpin. So if you just type I at stopped equals, then we're going to grab the group value. So use in point group, parentheses, 0, comma, pin in quotes, comma, at pt num, and parentheses with a semicolon. And then hit enter and type at glue to animation equals, and then you can just copy and paste the same expression. Hop back out and you can see that we have that unpin action going. So these pieces seem to just kind of fly everywhere. So first let's make a ground plane and merge that in using Shift R to make sure that it comes in from the left. Now make another merge and set it to mutual. And then make a static object. Now grab our original geo and set this to deforming so that the object will collide with the base. Now last thing is let's just give this some wind. So I'm going to bring the air resistance way up since these are supposed to be super light objects that we kind of want to just flutter everywhere. And I'm going to give just a little bit of noise, maybe a tiny bit of Y lift. And if you come back out in the sim object, just type vellum object 1 so that we're only binding in little pieces of confetti. And now make a point vop with a random node hooked up to ID, and then a ramp binding out to the color. Add some colors that you like here, and change the interpolation to constant. And now if you just merge this with our original geo, I'm just going to let it slowly cache. And there you have it. We've got some confetti falling. So have fun customizing this one. A fun project to try out would be, instead of using the Y position to unpin, try figuring out how you can get it to be released with the velocity of the turn. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Project files are on our site. I'm Nick Donatelli, and see you next time.